Hello brothers and sisters, my name is Carlos and welcome to my channel, Son of Manasseh. I am an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and this is my presentation called Israel's Dilemma and Our Duty, Birthrights, Covenants and Blessings. I'm putting together these presentations slash videos, whatever you want to call them, for four main reasons. One is to expound and teach doctrine. Two is to share with the members of the church or members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints how I study, so maybe it can give them ideas on how to study as well. Three, to help people realize and understand the times that we are living in. There has never been a greater need as members of Christ's church to understand the scriptures. And so I'm hoping that these presentations and these videos will help people to really gain a greater love and relationship with the scriptures and also with the keys, prophets from the past and prophets that are present at this time at the moment. And then the last reason is because I feel that there's a lot of people outside of the church that are probably like, man, what the heck is going on in life? Things seem to be turned upside down in the moment, you know, like the economy, not just the economy, but just life in general. People are going crazy out there. And so there might be a lot of people who have a faith or belief in God or Jesus Christ and want to make sense out of things. And so I would invite you all to come here and listen to these presentations and listen to the wonderful doctrines that we have in the restored Church of Jesus Christ that's on the earth today. So on that note, let's dive straight into this presentation. So as you can see, honestly, I first started out this presentation just going over the what's the name? the House of Israel. And then I just kept building and building and building onto it until it became this massive beast that you can see before you. Because I felt like it's a real amazing story that I feel once we gain a greater understanding of it, it helps us to really understand where we fit in the picture. And you would notice as well that President Nelson, our prophet, not too long ago in one of the previous conferences asked us to study the blessings and the blessings of Israel and also our duties as well. So this is our presentation. This is my presentation, and I hope you guys enjoy it. I've got this legend here that I've put together. Yellow boxes are for wives. Brownish color is for lost birthrights. Other sons, the grey box is for those outside of Israel. Orange is birthright. This peachy colour is student manuals. Any of our church's student manuals, and also quotes that have come from people who have held keys in the past or on the earth today. And then purple is scriptures, and green is dispensations. The other thing that I want to cover is, in order for us to really be on the same page, we need to get a good, solid understanding of a few definitions. So I want to cover these three boxes up here before we start diving into the story. Okay, so the first thing I want to cover is firstborn. The term firstborn, what does it mean? In the patriarchal order, the firstborn son is the heir and inherits the leadership of the family upon the death of the father. This is often spoken of in the scriptures as birthright. Under the law of Moses, the firstborn son was regarded as belonging to God, and special ordinances were provided for his redemption. Interesting. The eldest son received a double portion of his father's possessions, and after his father's death, he was responsible for the care of the mother and sisters. The male firstborn of animals also belonged to God. Clean animals were used for sacrifices, while unclean animals might be redeemed, sold, or put to death. Jesus is the firstborn of the spirit children of our Heavenly Father, the only begotten of the Father in the flesh, and the first to rise from the dead in the resurrection, that in all things he might have the preeminence. The faithful saints were made members of the church of the firstborn in eternity, since they received through Jesus Christ the inheritance of the firstborn. Joseph, though not the firstborn of Jacob, received the inheritance as though he were the firstborn, as also did Ephraim. We'll dive into that as we go along in this story or this journey that these guys went on. In matters of priesthood in the Aaronic order, certain prerogatives descend upon the firstborn. For example, the right of presidency to hold the keys of that priesthood pertains to the firstborn in the family of Adam. This comes from the Bible dictionary of our in the scriptures, so you'll be able to find it there. The next thing that I want to cover is birthright. Okay, so we've covered firstborn and now we're going into birthright, and they tie into each other, right? Because the firstborn is the firstborn, but the firstborn is the firstborn son receives the birthright. So what's the birthright? Under the patriarchal order, the right or inheritance of the firstborn is known as birthright. This generally included a land inheritance, as well as the authority to preside. Okay, once dad dies, he gets to preside. All right. The firstborn of flocks and of human families was considered as belonging to the Lord and was expected to be dedicated to him. This dedication could either be literal or by the payment of redemption money. From time to time, certain prerogatives, opportunities, and blessings have attended those who were born of a particular lineage. Thus, the office of high priest of the Aaronic order and the office of the patriarch to the church in the Melchizedek priesthood are hereditary in nature. Lineage alone does not guarantee the blessings or spiritual power of the office, but the opportunities are offered to the firstborn of the selected lineage. There are several instances in the scriptures of the one who was the firstborn losing his birthright because of unrighteousness, and his office being given to another, such as the case with Esau and Reuben. So we'll go through those a little bit later on as well. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Firstborn is the firstborn, and he receives the birthright. That includes, most like pretty much always included some sort of land inheritance and also the authority to preside. What people tend to forget is that along with the birthright came the added responsibility, right? So as we go back over here, the reason why they were given the say like an extra portion of dad's inheritance was because they had to take care of the mother and the sisters. These guys fell under the umbrella of the firstborn who had that birthright. Okay, so important point there. And the last thing that I want to cover is who is a Gentile. The phrase Gentile, right? In our church, we throw that around quite a lot, and I don't think people quite understand what Gentile is or what it means, right? It's sort of some sort of like mystery. Okay, so this is, once again, you can find this in our Bible dictionary. It's pretty straightforward. The basic meaning of the word Gentile is foreign, other, or non. Thus, to a Hebrew, a Gentile is a non-Hebrew. To an Israelite, a Gentile is a non-Israelite. And to a Jew, a Gentile is a non-Jew. In this sense, some Latter-day Saints have referred to those who are not members of the church as Gentiles, even though the non-members might be Jews. The word Gentile might also be used in several different ways to refer to family, religious, political, or even geographical relationships. For example, a person might be considered an Israelite in a family or blood sense, but might be called a Gentile in a political or geographical sense, because he lives in a land or nation that is primarily Gentile or non-Israelitish. And that's from our Ensign in 1991. Okay, so the reason why I wanted to add in Gentile, right, is because most of the scriptures that we usually read on a day-to-day where it references Gentiles, especially in the Book of Mormon, is referring to non-Israelitish. Okay, so all of those that are born outside of this family tree here. Okay, that's what the word or phrase is the Gentile is referring to, especially in the Book of Mormon, right? But not always. Okay. So on that note, let's dive straight into the story. We'll start at the fourth dispensation, and this is approximately 1917 BC and lasted around about 430 years. So Abraham, he opened up a new dispensation, and this was the fourth dispensation, all right? Abraham's a man. Honestly, he's a man. Anyways, he has two brothers, Nahor and Haran, okay? And now Haran has a daughter whose name is Sarah. And then Abraham decides, hey, you know what? I'm going to marry you, Sarah. So he married his niece. Pretty weird to us, but I guess that's how they did things back in those days. So he married Sarah. Sarah couldn't have kids, right? And so it was a bit of a drain on their relationship. Or it was just a struggle for them, right? I should probably say that. I want to cover the Abrahamic covenant real quick. So Abraham made covenants with God when he received the gospel, because he opened up a new dispensation, right? When he was ordained a high priest, and when he entered into celestial marriage. Okay, so what we have up there, he's got 3 wives, right? And these are in order. That's celestial marriage. That's what he was practicing. In these covenants, God promised great blessings to Abraham and his family. These blessings, which extend to all of Abraham's seed, are called the Abrahamic covenant. Okay, so they're among the promises made to Abraham were the following. Okay, so this applies to us, right? I should put here 1. His posterity would be numerous. 2. His seed or descendants would receive the gospel and bear the priesthood. Well, we know that. And then number 3. Through the ministry of his seed, all the families of the earth would be blessed, even with the blessings of the gospel, which are the blessings of salvation, even of life eternal. So now when someone asks you, hey, what's the Abrahamic covenant? Bam, you read these 3 points, that's the Abrahamic covenant. Or that's the blessings, you could say. That's the promises, right? A person can receive all the blessings of the Abrahamic covenant, even if he or she is not a literal descendant of Abraham, by obeying the laws and ordinances of the gospel. Okay, so what would we call that? Even if he or she is not a literal descendant, Gentile, right? Outside of that family tree, he obeys the laws and ordinances of the gospel, and he receives the blessings, or she receives the blessings of the Abrahamic covenant as she's baptized into, or he's baptized into the church. All right. So Abraham marries Sarah. They can't have kids. They were promised a kid, but that didn't, it wasn't overnight that this happened. This took years, right? So Sarah gave Hagar, who was a handmaiden, to Abraham to wife. God said, yep, all good. And then they had Ishmael together, right? Afterwards, right, Ishmael was the oldest, right? And then afterwards, Isaac comes along. Sarah finally has a baby and has Isaac. There's a bit of a this family dynamic is pretty complicated now, right? So even Ishmael and Isaac started having a bit of beef. Sarah and Hagar started having a bit of beef. Sarah and Ishmael started having a bit of beef. Ishmael starts picking on Isaac, and then Sarah turns around and tells Abraham, oi, yeah, you know, Hagar and Ishmael, they're kind of getting on my nerve. Can you tell them to get lost? Abraham has this real struggle within, because he's just like, hey, I love everyone. But he turns to the Lord, and the Lord says, yes, tell them that they need to move on, right? And so I can only imagine how hard that would be, because he loved Hagar, he loved Ishmael, he loved everyone, and he probably wanted to try and keep it all together. But it wasn't going to happen, and the The Lord knew it ahead of time. All right. So Ishmael, son of Abraham. In the Old Testament, a son of Abraham and Hagar, Sarah's Egyptian handmaid, the Lord promised both Abraham and Hagar that Ishmael would become the father of a great nation. The covenant came through Isaac rather than Ishmael. God blessed Ishmael that he would be fruitful. Ishmael helped bury Abraham later on in life. Ishmael's 12 sons were named. Ishmael died. Esau took Ishmael's daughter, Mahalath, to be his wife. Okay, cool. So the Lord promised Abraham that through Ishmael he will have a mighty nation, even though the Lord was going to bring his covenants through Isaac. He's like, don't worry, Ishmael's going to have out of him come a mighty nation as well. And so who was that? That was the 12 tribes of Israel, also known as the Arabs / Muslims, came through Ishmael. All right, so huge, very massive nation that came from Ishmael. But here's a question: do they still receive the blessings of Abraham? Yes, they do. Okay, so anyway, so Abraham, Sarah, Hagar, Keturah. Isaac has the blessing; he's got the birthright. Okay, Keturah, through Keturah, don't even know if I'm saying it right, but through Keturah you have the Midianites, right? And then the Midianites have their own line, their own nation that comes from them. Okay, so now Isaac has the birthright. Okay, so when Abraham passes away, the mantle falls upon Isaac, right? He receives his inheritance. He's got everything on him, on his shoulders now. He marries Rebekah, and through Rebekah, they have a set of twins, Esau and Jacob. Esau was number one, followed by Jacob. Okay, so Esau received the birthright. Now let's learn a little bit about Esau. Esau's name means hairy. I wouldn't want to be named hairy. He was the eldest son of Isaac and twin brother of Jacob. The two brothers were rivals from their birth and became the ancestors of rival nations, the Israelites and Edomites. Esau sold to Jacob his birthright, by which he lost both the leadership of the tribe and also the covenant blessing. Okay, so that's what he lost when he sold his birthright. He married against the wishes of his parents and settled in Mount Seir. He was living there on Jacob's return from Padan Aram. By that time, he saw clearly that the covenant blessing and the land of Canaan would not be his, and the brothers separated in friendly fashion. Of Esau's subsequent history, nothing is known for his descendants. Okay, so these guys had beef from birth. Sounds like me and my brothers. Pretty typical, but he sold something that he didn't really understand, which is his birthright. And so now through Jacob received that birthright. He received the mantle. He received everything from his father Isaac. Okay, so Esau went and gapsed it and pretty much went on a OE and married outside Isaac and Rebekah's wishes. Okay, and now Jacob, he was the one that was favored by the Lord. He received the birthright. Now, when we get to Jacob, also, by the way, through Esau, you have the Edomites, and through the Edomites, you have the Amalekites as well. All of these stories are in the Bible. All of these lineages are in the Bible, and they all intertwine. Through Jacob, this is where things blow up, because he also receives, well, for one, the birthright, but he also receives the priesthood. He receives celestial marriage, and he starts marrying these women here, which is Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, and Zilpah. And this is in order. These two here, what's their relationship? Well, they are sisters. And so we go through Nahor, which is Abraham's brother. Through his lineage, you have Laban, right? And Laban is the father of Leah and Rachel. So they're two sisters, and Jacob's just like, whoa, yep, okay, cool. Takes them on. Leah's his number one wife, and Rachel's number two wife, and then he takes on two more as well. So through Jacob, we obviously have the 12 sons of Jacob / Israel. Right, his name is changed to Israel because of the covenant that he makes. So let's dive into the setup of how this family is broken up. Okay, so we go from top to bottom. The highest is the oldest. They're the ones that are born first. So through Leah, he has 4 sons, right? Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Reuben receives the birthright. Now, he actually lost his birthright. What did he get up to? He laid with Bilhah. And these guys seriously have crazy relationships. Yeah. So he laid with Bilhah, and because he did that, he lost his birthright. Okay. Now, what's the order of the sons? So you have Reuben to Judah, that was through Leah, and then after that, Rachel didn't have any kids. Right, it went straight to Bilhah. And Bilhah had 2 kids, whose names were Dan and Naphtali. And then after that, you had child 7 and 8, which is through Zilpah, Gad, and Asher. And then 9 and 10 goes back to Leah. So he comes back to Leah and has 2 more children, 2 more sons, Issachar and Zebulun, right? So these guys are all brothers, but they all have different mothers, right? Now this is where it gets interesting, because Rachel has two sons of her own. First is Joseph. Okay, so Joseph, he's this little boy, right? And he's got all of these older brothers. Okay, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 older brothers, and he receives the birthright because he's the oldest son of the next wife, right? So he receives that birthright, and it's almost like a lot of the scriptures and even the movies that you have, Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, it's like he has this special treatment that's given of him. And so because of that, there's this animosity that grows from all these other brothers. They're just like, man, stuff this guy. He gets this luxurious life when we get treated like crap, pretty much. So they didn't like him, right? And obviously we've got how, the story of how he's sold into Egypt. The Lord obviously knew this right from the get-go. He was able to foresee this, and this was a part of his big plan, right? So these brothers, right, obviously sold him into Egypt, and when he's in Egypt, we all know the story. I won't dive into the details of that. But Joseph then marries Asenath, and then through her, right, and she's the what's the name? She's the Potiphar's daughter, and so she's also one of the handmaidens there in Egypt. Okay, so through them they have 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Rachel, after he's gapsed it, Rachel has another son who's Benjamin. Okay, so Joseph's full younger brother, his name's Benjamin. Okay, and they are what consist of the 12 sons, and out of these 12 sons, 12 tribes come from. Okay, now so a lot of these tribes, a lot of these sons, nations grow out of them, and some of them stand out and are very relevant to us, and some of them sort of it's not that they're less important, but their roles aren't as prominent as some of the others. Okay, so let's just say, for example, once these guys start growing in tribes, right? Through Levi, we've got the tribe of Levi, right? And they had a special duty to hold the priesthood, okay? So did not receive an inheritance because they were called by the Lord to serve as priesthood ministers to the tribes, right? Judah, for example, his tribe was to be the ruler tribe until the Messiah, all right? And then from these tribes out of Judah comes David, and obviously the Savior later on down the line. Out of Levi comes Moses, okay? Out of Benjamin comes Saul. That's another one. Now, what's most important to us is out of Joseph comes Manasseh and Ephraim, right? Now, the tribes that come forth from Manasseh and Ephraim are really important to us in as members of the Church of Jesus Christ, because majority of us, whether we are literal descendants or we're adopted in, will be adopted into, we fall into these two categories, either Ephraim and Manasseh. Why is that? This is what we're going to start exploring into. May touch on it a little bit here, but maybe a little bit later on we'll be revisiting our duty and how that goes about. But the main thing that we're going to do now is just, now that we have an understanding of the family, right, we're going to start following their journey and start moving through the dispensations, and then see what the dilemma that was created for them or that came about, okay, for different reasons. A lot of it is to do with sins and iniquities and not listening. But let's keep going. So let's start out with Manasseh, right? So Manasseh, he should have received the birthright, okay? Now, unlike these guys, Ishmael, he was a little bit different, but Isaac received it because of Sarah, right? Sarah was his was the first wife. Isaac then had Esau and Jacob. Esau lost it because he sold it, and he was being a bit of a bad boy for a little bit there. And then Jacob had Reuben, and then obviously Reuben did what he did, right? Manasseh is a little bit different. We don't actually know what happened between Manasseh and Ephraim, but Ephraim received the birthright over Manasseh, okay? So I'm going to read to you what is in our guide to the scriptures and also our Bible dictionary, I think it is, about what we can find out about these two tribes, okay? All right, let's start out with Manasseh. In the Old Testament, the oldest son of Asenath and Joseph, who was sold into Egypt, he and his brother Ephraim were grandsons of Jacob, Israel, but were adopted and blessed by him as if they were his own sons, the tribe of Manasseh. Manasseh's descendants were numbered among the tribes of Israel. Moses' blessing of the tribe of Joseph, which was given also to Ephraim and Manasseh, is recorded in Deuteronomy. Their assigned land was partly west of the Jordan and next to Ephraim's. They also had colonies east of the Jordan in the rich pasture land of Bashan and Gilead. In the last days, the tribe of Manasseh will assist. Really, really, really important word there. Assist the tribe of Ephraim in gathering scattered Israel. The Book of Mormon prophet Lehi was a descendant of Manasseh. Okay, let's read about Ephraim. In the Old Testament, the second son of Joseph and Asenath, contrary to the traditional manner, Ephraim received the birthright blessing instead of Manasseh, who was the eldest son. Ephraim became the father of the tribe of Ephraim. So the tribe of Ephraim was given the birthright in Israel. In the last days, their privilege and responsibility. Okay, so blessings, but also responsibility. Okay, when you get the birthright, you don't just get blessings, you get given responsibilities. It is to bear the priesthood, take the message of the restored gospel to the world, and raise an ensign to gather scattered Israel. Brothers and sisters, if I want you to take away anything from this presentation or this video here that I'm putting together, it's to understand what this really means, what I've highlighted here. Bear the priesthood, take the message of the restored gospel to the world, and raise an ensign to gather scattered Israel. When we understand that properly, we start living the gospel in a different way. And I promise you, brothers and sisters, when you start studying this stuff, it will change how you feel about the gospel. You will wake up with so much more gratitude for the gospel and for the things that you're a part of, right? Just understanding this has blessed my life, and it's taken my level of discipleship to another level because I now understand it. Okay, all right, moving on. The children of Ephraim will crown with glory those from the north countries who return in the last days. We'll dive into this when we get to the last dispensation. Okay, so that's Ephraim. So Ephraim is the birthright tribe, but both sons were adopted by Jacob to receive the double inheritance through his birthright son Joseph. All right, I wanted to add this in here as well. All right, so this is from my own patriarchal blessing, and I want to share it with you. I give to you your lineage in Israel, that you are of the tribe of Manasseh, son of Joseph. And through that noble tribe you receive the blessings of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and of the house of Israel. You receive also your duty to spread the gospel and to gather in the lost descendants of Israel. That's me. I'm from Manasseh, and my duty is to assist Ephraim in succeeding in his duty, and I want to do everything I can to do that. Let's read this. As far as the Bible indicates, Joseph had only one wife, Asenath. I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but anyways. And they had only two sons, Manasseh, the firstborn, and Ephraim. When Joseph brought his two sons to their grandfather Jacob for a father's or patriarchal blessing, it is obvious that Joseph expected Manasseh to receive the greater blessing, as it displeased Joseph when Jacob set Ephraim before Manasseh and gave the greater blessing to the younger brother. Neither the Bible nor modern scripture explains specifically why Jacob departed from the usual practice of primogeniture. So that's where the firstborn receives, this whole pattern of firstborn receiving the mind blank, the birthright. Sorry. Where are we at? Okay. But the Joseph Smith translation and the Doctrine and Covenants indicate that Jacob was directed by the Lord in giving the greater blessing to Ephraim. Thus Ephraim received the birthright of Joseph, and Joseph received the birthright of Jacob, Israel. In a sense then, Ephraim is the birthright son of Israel, as confirmed by the Lord through his prophet Jeremiah. I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. And that comes from What Laws Governed the Inheritance of Birthright in the Old Testament, 1980 ensign. Amazing ensign, if you want to read that article. Okay, so what's her name? Jacob at the time when he caught up with Joseph, and he was old, so Joseph comes to give his sons receive receive that patriarchal blessing by the patriarch, right? Joseph wasn't to do it at the time because even though he had the birthright, his father was still alive, so he took his children to his father, right? If his father had passed away beforehand, he would have done it himself. But at this time, Joseph was a little bit confused because he put the wrong hand. He switched hands, right? Jacob switched hands when he was blessing them together. And he was sort of a bit confused because at this time, Jacob was actually blind. He had lost his sight, right? And so Joseph tried to correct Jacob, but Jacob was like, no, this is what I've received through revelation. This is the way it's supposed to be. That's how it went down. Okay, so Ephraim has the birthright. He's the birthright tribe. And what happened is that Jacob adopted these two sons into the 12 tribes, into the 12 sons, right? So they become in total 13 sons of Israel, right? And that's brought up a few times in the scriptures as well. All right, so through Manasseh and Ephraim, who do we have? Through Manasseh, we have Lehi, right? He's a descendant of Manasseh. And then through Ephraim, we've got Ishmael, right? And then also Ephraim, you've got Joseph Smith. That's later on. So we'll bring him up later on down this line here. He is from Ephraim as well. Okay, so let's go through real quick what happens with these guys. So there is a massive as famine. Joseph obviously saves the day for Egypt and pretty much the whole of Israel. They come through Egypt and is saved by the work that Joseph has put in, right? Later on, these tribes, the Israelites, become in bondage to the Egyptians, okay? And then they start adopting all of their ways. Pretty much all the priesthood and their ordinances and all of their practices start to become watered down by the Egyptians, because the Egyptians have their ways. They had their gods, they had their practices, and they were very strong, a very, very strong nation, okay? But that left the Israelites in a pretty difficult position. So then the fifth dispensation opens up, right? So this leads to an eventual apostasy. The fifth dispensation opens up, which is approximately 1487 BC and lasts 1500 years. Okay. So who does the next dispensation open up with? Moses, my man Moses. And where does Moses come from? Moses comes from Levi. Okay. So now that they're in Egypt, Moses, he becomes their deliverer, right? But he needs the priesthood. So where does he get his priesthood from? Because he can't get it from these guys, right? He doesn't get it from these guys. He gets it from a whole nother line. So where does he get it from? He gets it from Jethro. Where does Jethro come from? Jethro comes all the way back up here through the Midianites. Okay, so this is a different line of the priesthood. And that's through Abraham, through his other wife, Keturah. Okay, so that's interesting fact for you there. All right, cool. So let's move forward. We'll start smashing up these events here. Israelites are delivered from the Egyptians through Moses, which that's amazing. After they are delivered, they go through the Red Sea. They're in the wilderness. There's this whole journey where the Lord, or the presence of the Lord, is with them. The cloud of smoke by day and the pillar of fire by night. These guys are like, seriously, in some... I mean, if we were to see some of the stuff that they were seeing, it would literally change us instantly, because they were seeing miracles happen in front of them, right? But what kind of people do you have to be just to be like, hey, yeah, I get it. We just walked through a massive ocean. We've seen pillars of fire. We're still seeing them now. Let's just start being wicked, eh? And these guys are like, hey, what a great idea. Let's do that. I don't get it. But that's them, right? And that's the type of people that these guys were at the time, the Israelites. There was a lot of wickedness. So the Lord obviously wanted to give them the higher law. He wanted to give them everything, right? He wanted to be in their presence, but because of their wickedness and their refusal, they were like, imagine that this guy would have been frustrated as. He would have been so frustrated because he was stuck between the Lord, being the Lord's mouthpiece, and trying to get a nation in shape to receive all the blessings that the Lord was willing to give them right then and there, right? So this is where he tries to give them the higher law. The Moses comes to deliver it to them, and he sees that these guys they've taken Egypt with them, right? They didn't leave Egypt behind. They started bringing their practices and their idolatry and all that stuff with them. And so Moses is just like, yeah, you're probably not going to like this, talking to Jehovah, but these guys are doing some pretty crazy stuff, right? And so that's when the higher law was replaced with the 10 Commandments, right? Which is the carnal law, the lower law, pretty much the basics, right? The Lord came down to their level and said, all right, let's start from the bottom and let's make our way back up, okay? So they journeyed in the wilderness for ages because they had a lot of wickedness that needed to be purged from their nation in order for them to reach and receive the promised land, which is in Canaan, okay? So that's them. Anyways, a bit long-winded. Once there's this cleansing that takes place amongst them, right, they finally make it into the promised land and receive their land inheritance in Canaan, okay? All right. So then these guys all start, they all have their different tribes and they all have their different, Levi still had his function and whatnot, but they all sort of started to fit under one umbrella and became a kingdom under Saul and then later David, okay? So where does Saul come from? Saul comes from Benjamin and David comes from Judah, right? And so they were underneath this big, massive umbrella. But these guys, there was moments of righteousness, but eventually they became wicked, okay? And because of the wickedness, these tribes were divided into two kingdoms, okay? So we've got the kingdom of the south, known as the kingdom of Judah, and then we had the kingdom of Israel, which was the northern kingdom. So I've got on this left-hand side here, the green, that's the southern kingdom, and then the red side, which is the northern kingdom. Now these guys were they were led by different kings, okay, and they all had a series of kings. But when they started splitting off, you had Rehoboam to retain the one tribe. It was the Lord said that he would split the tribes up and have one tribe remain with the kingdom of Judah, and then Jeroboam, to receive the 10 tribes, okay? So there's a bit of speculation here as to how this all split up. And so I've got an article up here which I want to read, which is blood tribes versus land tribes, because when these guys finally reached Canaan, right, they were all in their blood tribes, but they received an inheritance in the land of Canaan. And once they had received an inheritance, they started to split up into what is known as land tribes, okay? Especially the tribe of Manasseh. So I want to read this through here, and then we've got a bit of a picture here. This all comes from, where does this come from? It comes from a ensign. This is our link right here. It's one of the ensigns I've seen from a few decades ago. And this is the link right here. An amazing article. I would suggest you guys all read it. So blood tribes versus land tribes. Throughout the period of the Exodus from Egypt, 13 tribes are generally listed instead of 12. This is because Jacob adopted the two sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, in order that they might have the double inheritance due to the birthright son. Thus, when the Israelites returned from Egypt to Canaan, each of the two tribes descended from Joseph was given a share of land. Moreover, the tribe of Manasseh was further divided into two land groups in the settlement of the Promised Land, one half preferring to settle in the territory east of the Jordan, and the other taking up its inheritance in Canaan. See map. Alright, so here's our map here. So you've got Manasseh here, and then you've got the Jordan River, and then you've got another section of Manasseh here. So they became two tribes, alright? And they actually had different names as well. Alright. These two land divisions are mentioned numerous times in the Old Testament as distinct half-tribes. And so we often read of the 9 tribes and the half-tribe that settled in Canaan, and the 2 tribes and the half-tribe that settled in Transjordan. The latter half-tribe was also referred to as Machir, after the son of Manasseh, whose descendants comprised that half-tribe. In effect then, the subdividing of the land inheritance of Joseph into 3 allotments, Ephraim, Manasseh, and Machir. I don't know how to say it, but anyways. Plus the other 11 sons of Israel brought the total number of distinct tribal groups mentioned to 14. So there's 14 tribes. 14 land tribes. Thereafter, we must always be aware of the difference between blood Israel, the tribes descended from the 12 sons of Jacob, and what might be called land Israel, the tribal groups that received distinct land inheritances in Canaan. As one can see, the one blood Israel tribe of Joseph resulted in 3 land Israel inheritances. To further complicate the matter, one of these 14 groups, Levi, was given no land inheritance per se. Instead, the Levites were allotted cities throughout all of the various tribes in order that they might serve the nation through the Aaronic priesthood which they held. Also, one of the tribes, Dan, had to forego its original allotted portion, bordering on the west of Judah, Benjamin, and Ephraim because of its inability to cope with Philistine invasions. The struggle between the Danites and the Philistines is partially chronicled in the story of Samson. Ultimately, however, the tribe of Dan left its seacoast inheritance and migrated to the north, where they settled in the Hula Valley. Had they not done so, they would perhaps not have been taken captive by the Assyrians centuries later. And that's January 1982 ensign. That's this reference right here. Take a snapshot of that if you want. So here's the picture right here. So you've got this is Canaan, right? You've got the inheritances of the 12 tribes. This dark blue is the inheritance of Joseph. Obviously, they've got a pretty big portion. Manasseh there, Manasseh here. Ephraim's down here, the River Jordan. The area of Levite cities. So Levi didn't receive a land inheritance because they had the right of holding the priesthood and administering the priesthood to all of the tribes. So they were scattered throughout everywhere, right? And they served that function in the house of Israel. And then Dan was getting stuffed up. And so Dan started gapping it to the other side, right? So Dan was down here and they started gapping it all the way up north because they were under siege, right? So now coming back to here, we've got these tribes, right? So the southern tribes, we know Judah was obviously in the southern tribe. It was the kingdom of Judah, but Benjamin was to stay with Judah. Okay, so we've got Reuben and Levi here as well, but the tribes of the north, right, in the northern kingdom, these are the land tribes. Okay, so let's mention these. You got Reuben, Asher, Dan, Issachar, Naphtali, Zebulun, Gad, Ephraim, half tribe of Manasseh, Machir, and they're all in the north. Okay, Levi would be in the north as well because they were scattered everywhere. But Reuben as well. I read a pretty interesting quote that Reuben was actually swallowed up by Judah. over time, and so Reuben was in the southern kingdom as well. So what happened is, long story short, both these guys actually became wicked eventually, but the northern kingdom were pretty wicked, right? They were sent prophets to say, hey guys, if you don't repent, the Lord's gonna come and he's gonna come and humble you guys, right? Obviously they didn't listen, and so the Assyrians started to come into the land, and then that led to their eventual conquest by the Assyrians in 722 BC. So then what happened? The Assyrians came and claimed all that land, and then pretty much picked all these guys up and took them away, right? So at this time, we've got these guys that were taken into Assyrian captivity in Assyria, right? So now they're pretty much prisoners there, okay? Let's actually stick with the northern tribe for a second. All right, so what happened once they were there? Let's read that. How long Israel, which is the northern tribe, the northern kingdom, how long Israel remained in Assyria after they had been carried away captive by Sargon II is not known. It is likely that many accepted the life and culture of their captors and lost their identity. They had gone into captivity because of their extreme wickedness, so it would not be surprising to find them accepting the pagan culture of the Assyrians. Let me just grab a drink. Alright. One of the books of the Apocrypha, however, records that one group of the captives saw that their captivity was the result of their own wickedness and sought the Lord in repentance. The Lord heeded their cries and led them away into the north countries. In the Apocrypha, Esdras describes the following vision. But they took this counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into the further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow passages of the river, for the Most High then shewed signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over. So once again, absolute miracle. They passed through a river. A whole nation, a whole kingdom passed through a river, just like they did in the Red Sea. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Arsareth. Then dwelt they there until that latter time. Elder George Reynolds commented on the direction of the travels of the tribes of Israel. They determined to go to a country where never man dwelt, that they might be free from all contaminating influences. So it's obvious that these guys, right, they were in Assyria, and it's almost like the Lord knew, okay, I'll put you guys here until you have learned your lesson, right? Almost like a little kid. So they learnt their lesson, because what did they want to do? They were like, okay, let's just start fresh, guys? Let's go somewhere new, have a fresh start. And they wanted it to be free from contaminating influences, right? So other tribes, other nations, other rituals, cultures, philosophies, they wanted a fresh start. That country could only be found in the north. Southern Asia was already the seat of a comparatively ancient civilization. Egypt flourished in northern Africa, and southern Europe was rapidly filling with the future rulers of the world. They had therefore no choice but to turn their faces northward. The first portion of their journey was not, however, north. According to the account of Esdras, they appear to have at first moved in the direction of their old home, and it is possible that they originally started with the intention of returning thereto, or probably in order to deceive the Assyrians, they started as if to return to Canaan. Okay, so they probably had someone on their backs, right, chasing them. And when they crossed the Euphrates and were out of danger from the hosts of Medes and Persians, then they turned their journeying feet toward the polar star, and that's James E. Talmage in the Articles of Faith. The account in Ezra is supported by what the Saviour taught the Nephites, for he said the lost tribes had been led away out of the land by the Father. 3 Nephi 15:15. Ada Reynolds' explanation takes into account the numerous prophecies that indicate that when the 10 lost tribes return, they will come out of the north. Where they went is not known, and this fact has led to much speculation about their present whereabouts. The Lord has not seen fit to reveal their location. However, and until he does so, it is useless to try to identify their present locality. Certain things about this intriguing group have been revealed through Latter-day Scriptures and the writings of living prophets. These are discussed below. That's 3 Nephi 15:15 again. And that comes from our Old Testament student manual. So I know we're bringing up different scriptures here, but guys, this is in our student manual. So there we go. And I've got this picture here as well. So here's the land of Canaan. These guys were taken to Assyria, right? And then once they were in Assyria, they were there for a while. This was a massive as stronghold. Nineveh, you got Nineveh there. These guys were like the emperor, the some of the biggest rulers of the time, right? The 10 tribes, they gap it and make it past the river Euphrates, and then decide to go north. And then, or they could have come up here and crossed the river. Somewhere they crossed this river Euphrates and then disappeared northward. Where they went from that point onwards, we have no idea. Okay, so these guys are the 10 lost tribes. Now, since this time here, 722 BC, have they come back? Are they around? No. We don't know where they are. The Lord hasn't revealed their location to us still. And it's going to stay that way until a few things start happening in this last time, right, in these last days. And we'll get into that in a little bit later on, maybe in another video. So let's dive over to the southern kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, and let's talk about what happens to them briefly. And what we'll do is we'll cut off on the 6th dispensation. We'll end it there, all right? So now that these guys have been stuffed up, right? They're taken away. They're out of the picture. The kingdom of Israel, or the northern kingdom. The southern kingdom, right? I should add that when these guys became very, very wicked, right? The northern kingdom of Israel, there were people that realized, hey, hold on, this isn't right. This is not the right way to do things. And so what happened? You had some of these tribes like Reuben. You definitely had Levi, right? Levi gapped it over to the southern kingdom, okay? You had, pretty much a little bit of each of the tribes. Ephraim and Manasseh, or whoever was the righteous, they took off, and majority of them would have made it over to the southern kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, okay? And how do we know that? Well, let's dive into this storyline. So it got to the point where they received prophets, right? And they were given the same warnings. Guys, listen, it's not too long ago that you know what happened to the northern kingdom, right? If you guys don't start repenting, stuff's going to start happening to us as well. And we need to change our ways. Of course, did they listen? No, they didn't. And so what happened? They had the Babylonians. They came in, right, at 586. Now, right before that time, who was one of the prophets that came up and started speaking to them and started warning them? Well, you got this guy here, our main man, Lehi. Lehi starts rocking up to these guys, right? And it's just like, guys, just repent, man. Change your ways. Otherwise, you guys are going to get stuffed up. And what happened? They tried to kill him, right? So Jeremiah, he was in the picture as well. So what happened to Lehi? What did the Lord tell Lehi to do? Right, time to pack your bags, Lehi. You need to get out of there because I'm going to destroy the place, right? And so Lehi packs his bags and he takes off and travels into the wilderness, right? So what tribe was Lehi from? Lehi was from Manasseh. And that's how we know that it wasn't just straight Judah or Benjamin that was in this country in this kingdom at the time. That there were little bits of other tribes as well. So Manasseh was there through Lehi, and so he takes off into the wilderness, and being a prophet, he receives guidance from the Lord. The Lord's going to take him and scatter him somewhere else. He's going to take him to the new land, to the promised land, right? Now, before he takes off, he's just like, oh, guys, guess what? To his sons, I've received a commandment, and it's that you need to go and get Ishmael and his family. Why did he ask to get Ishmael? Well, one, because the Lord commanded him. Two, because Ishmael, right, had a lot of daughters, so his sons needed to get married so that they could create a nation. But also Ishmael was from what tribe? Ishmael was from Ephraim. And so now you have the Book of Mormon, the record in the Americas that contain blood which comes from these two tribes, Manasseh and from Ephraim, right? And what do they write? They write scriptures. They've got prophets, and this record is called the Stick of Joseph because you've got Ephraim and Manasseh, right? That are the literal blood of these tribes that come from the Book of Mormon, the Nephites and the Lamanites. Okay, that's the Stick of Joseph. All right, so once Lehi's gapped it, 586 BC, the Babylonians come in and they smash the southern kingdom. They beat these guys up, and they pretty much do the same thing that was done to the northern kingdom. They put these guys into captivity. They carry them away, a lot of them away. Some were killed, some stayed, some ran away, and a lot of them were taken captive and carried into Babylonia / Babylon / Mesopotamia. I don't know how to pronounce that one either. So what happened once they were in captivity? The Babylonians were conquered by Persia, and exiled Israelites, or the Jews, were granted a return. Okay, so they returned in 537. So not 50 years later. A lot of them were allowed under Persian sort of rule to come back to Jerusalem and to rebuild this holy city. Okay, but you got to know that when they returned, not all of them came back. Some of them stayed, some of them took off somewhere else, and then some of them returned as well. All right, so that's where we're at now. One more thing before we wrap up this video is that with the kingdom of Israel, or the northern kingdom, so there is speculation as to who are the 10 tribes. Are they the blood tribes, right? Or are they the land tribes? Because if they are the blood tribes, or sorry, the land tribes, which would make a lot of sense because they were a part of the northern kingdom, was the land tribes, right? There's 10 of them here, which would leave 4 of them down in the south, right? But if they are the 10 tribes that are actual blood tribes, then it would have only left 2 tribes here, which is Judah and Benjamin. So there's a little bit of speculation as to whether it is land or blood tribes that were to make up these 10 tribes. At the end of the day, we don't know, right? And I think it will be awesome one day when the 10 tribes return and we get to see who they are. But what's also pretty cool is that Ephraim and Manasseh, they are a part of the 10 tribes. And Ephraim and Manasseh is who we are, do you know what I mean, as members of the church. So now that we've got that out of the way, just going back and stepping back and having a look at the overview just from the 5th dispensation, right? The journey that these Israelites took, we've started this dilemma where now there's this family that's gone through and become a great nation, and they've just started moving around, right? And now there's this scattering starting to happen, right? And it's happening because of the wickedness, right? So now we've got the 10 tribes. They've taken off. We have no idea where they are. The southern kingdom, they are literally being scattered, right, through Babylonian conquest, through the Persian conquest. Some stayed, some ran away, and some stayed on this side in Babylonia, in Babylon. Interesting saying, eh? Some stayed in Babylon, some didn't leave Babylon, and some ran away from Babylon, and then some returned as well. So we're literally having this scattering of Israel happening right in the 5th dispensation, which sets up this dilemma. So, brothers and sisters, I wanna end it there. There's obviously a lot that has happened over these last few dispensations, but in the next video I'm going to cover the things that are really relevant to us in terms of the signs of the times and the prophecies which Christ spoke about these tribes, and then our duty, what our duty is in this whole picture to fix this mess that's happened, right? This whole scattering. As well, if you have read the allegory of the olive tree, you should really start looking at this picture here and what's happening and how that can tie into the allegory of the olive tree, because that is exactly what this is. This is the allegory of the olive tree, which we're talking about right here in Jacob 5 in the Book of Mormon. Brothers and sisters, I want to leave my testimony with you that I know the church is true. I know that that the Lord has great promises to his covenant children, who are through these great men here, these great patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Through them we receive such amazing blessings. One of them being not only the Savior Jesus Christ himself, but also the gospel of Jesus Christ and all of its saving ordinances. We get it through these wonderful blessings which come under the Abrahamic covenant, and also under these tribes, the tribes of Israel. I love the gospel, brothers and sisters, and I'm very passionate about the truths that are available to us, and I hope that you've enjoyed this presentation, and I'll see you on the next video.